Hi everyone, Daniel from Homegrown Australia. I want to share with you some tips and tricks for how I've kept my plants alive during the summer period whilst I've been away on leave and holidays. And this has worked really well for me, and I hope you find it a little bit useful if you want to keep some plants alive. So I've got a few different methods, and I'll just walk my way through those very quickly. These are just a kid's sandpit bucket thing that you buy at the hardware store. I think they're about $20 each at Bunnings, and I've actually got 3 of these. And what I do is I fill them up with water, put my pot plants in them, put the pot plants under somewhere where it's a bit shady, so they're not drying out as fast in the summer heat. And this seems to have worked really well for me. I had to dig up some asparagus plants, some raspberry plants, and we've got some blueberries here, which, despite being under the shade, I've just picked a big bowl of blueberries this morning, and some strawberry plants. So this technique of basically having water storage and letting the water wick up into the pots has kept these plants alive when they otherwise would have taken a real beating. We had very hot days, high 30-degree Celsius days. So basically that's the water sitting in those kiddie pools or sand buckets. And then the other method is just these pots that you can just buy that basically have a little water well in the bottom of them. You fill them up, the water starts flowing out of the little hole at the bottom when they're full. And again, these plants have survived a couple of weeks with actually they did have a watering mid period there, so that sort of probably helped them as well. But that's a way of just keeping things alive when you're not around. In terms of vegetable beds, I'm looking forward to moving over to a wicking bed, but in the meantime, I've always used a bit of an irrigation drip line in the garden beds. What I haven't always done though is had that connected to a timer. So here I've just got a basic timer. This one came from Aldi here in Australia. They do regular changes of their stock, so they're not always available, but certainly stores like nurseries and Bunnings and other hardware stores carry a whole range of different brands of these timers. Some of them are getting quite sophisticated now. Some of them are very basic and they're just a little dial, so you can put a tap on and set a timer for half an hour or an hour. Others allow the valve in here to be turned on or off automatically based on a date and time, and you can set the frequency as well. So just running through this one, you can see here it's got the time, that's the current time, 9:42 a.m. here. I have it set to come on at 5:30. It goes for 240 minutes. What's that, 4 hours? The frequency is watering every day. The program is currently on. You can see my battery's full. I only just changed the batteries a few weeks ago before I went on leave. And the batteries in it previously were probably 2 years old and still okay, but it had been taken off the tap and not used regularly. So and then there's this manual capability that you can turn things on. So basically what happens at 5:30 in the morning, there's a valve that gets turned on. This tap's on at the moment, it's just permanently on. And when it turns on, it will stay on and it will count down this to 40 minutes all the way down to 1 and 0, and then it will turn the valve off in this system again, stopping the water flowing. So just to give you a bit of an indication, we can come down to the manual setting and you listen. And you can see there's a little tap indicator saying that the water's flowing. And you might have even heard, sorry, I was just trying to move the mic closer, the water flowing through this tap now. One thing I'll maybe just highlight, with this sort of system that you're going to leave alone, you want it to be reliable, and you don't want water leaking or bursting as a result of water pressure. So I'm just going to show you here. This is my tap. That's the off position. That's about where I have it in terms of the on position. Now this tap can be screwed many times around to get high pressure. I would rather have the drip running longer on low pressure than having it set at high pressure for a shorter period of time. If I've got high pressure, I'm going to find the weakness in my polypipe irrigation system. I might even find a weakness at the connections at the tap, which are a little bit stronger. One precautionary measure is I use Teflon wherever I've got thread. So Teflon is like a very thin ribbon that you can wrap around the tap connections, and just allows you to get a tighter, watertight thread or connection. So that's basically the system I'm using. So we've just set that for 4 minutes. So let's go up and have a look at the irrigation drip line. I've just got a hose that basically is running up to the garden beds. Actually, on the way there, here's a different sort of connection at the top with a little on-off switch here, connected to the polypipe, but that's not what we're looking at the moment. So the hose is just coming up to a single connection, and it's just connected to a polypipe. It's got a hose connector at the end of the polypipe, and that polypipe is going up underneath the garden bed. If I just zoom out, you can kind of see here the whole garden bed, and it's feeding its way into a tap. It's just an inline tap, and from there I've got 3-way connectors connecting to the 13mm drip line. Now I will show you a smaller drip line in a second that I previously used to use. I'm reluctant to use the smaller drip line now, and I'll explain why in a sec. But here you can see I've just ran 3 in a garden bed that's about 120 wide. I've just run 3 lines. Sometimes I run 2. With the smaller drip line, sometimes I used to run 4. And you can see here, it's just delivering a nice little drip. And so this puts plenty of water into the bed. A couple of different ways you can basically run these drip lines or polypipe lines is you can get a terminator to terminate at the end of the line. So I could just basically have the 3 lines running and then a terminator at the end of each one. Or you can get an elbow, and in here, in this case, we've got a 3-way connector connecting the 3 polypipes. So that completes a complete circuit. So if you did get a blockage anyway, the water could traverse an alternate path. I suppose it's a little bit of redundancy, isn't it? It also just helps keep the lines in place, although you can stake them down at the other end if you're just terminating them at the end of each line. So that's the 13mm drip line. If I come over here, I've got a bit of a legacy setup that I haven't converted yet. And you can see here, this is the smaller drip line. And I've actually turned this one off. So I'll just turn it back on. So I just turned it on at the little tap connector. And you can see here that's dripping away as well. One of the issues I have, look, I think there's a couple of pros and a couple of cons with this system, this smaller drip line. One, it's a little bit cheaper, and it's very easy if you get a blockage just to open it up and flush them out, and I'll show that in a sec. But the main issue that I have with the smaller drip line is that you punch a hole into your 13mm polypipe and you use these connectors. Well, the problem with that is they're not watertight, and so they do drip at this point, and as a consequence I get a lot of water running down the edge of the bed, and it's nice and damp on the other side of the garden bed down there. So I'm losing water where I don't want to lose it. But probably even worse than that is these just don't last. And the last thing you want is for them to break when you're not here, because water will be going everywhere there and you'll lose pressure in the rest of your drip lines. The more likely scenario is that they break when you're moving these lines around to maintain your garden beds, whether you're doing some weeding or digging or pulling plants out. And so I find they last, 2, 3, 4 years. These ones, I think maybe one of them's lasted for about 7 years and the other ones have been replaced, but that's sort of what you're playing with. So it's just not as robust a solution. If I come down to the end here, good, we've got one sticking out here. So at the end, they're just terminated with another small piece of polypipe. I actually have a pipe cutter that I use to cut the polypipe. You can use a Stanley knife, a pair of side cutters or something, I suppose. But so I just cut a little piece of polypipe off, and then that goes over the end of this. And it's just crinked over, and that stops it leaking. But what I can do is I can take that off, and you'll see. My timer just went out. The tap's just been turned off, but if that hadn't have been turned off, water would come shooting out of here, which just allows you to flush the line. So that's kind of a handy thing to be able to do. So that's a little bit about my systems that I use to keep the plants alive when I'm not here and over the summer periods. I've got that running from bed to bed to bed, into each of the beds, underneath the ground, and then back up into the garden beds. And so the water will find its own pressure right through the whole system. I guess I could put another hose connection up the other end as well, so I got water feeding from both ends. I had thought of doing that. I don't seem to need to do it, so I haven't bothered with it. I'm getting plenty of water. If we come down here, you can see the zucchinis right at the end of the line have just, during the hottest period, and probably the plant that's most susceptible to heat, where the leaves dry out because they're so big, has just thrived. And I had about 30 zucchinis off this in the time while I was away and since I come back, so off 4 plants. So there's been no issues there. Yeah, so I hope you found that a little bit interesting, and something that you can do for yourself. You can get plastic connectors. That one wasn't uptight for a reason. You can get these plastic connectors. You can get metal ones as well, which are a bit more expensive. That just tighten these things up around, and yeah, away you go. Keep your plants alive when you're not there, or just make your life easier so you're not having to water your garden beds manually. If you found that a little bit interesting or helpful, feel free to subscribe, like the video. Really appreciate your support, and look forward to making some more videos and keeping you a bit informed what's going on in my veggie gardens. Thanks for now. Bye.